I want to spend some time today talking about the concept of waking thoughts. Our waking thoughts. And this is something I wrote about some days ago and I posted it on my X page. And I want to just read it out to you right now to give some context to what I want to talk about today. And the post goes, pay attention to the thoughts that slip in as you wake. These are called waking thoughts. They hold incredible clarity but fade as you become fully conscious. Many miss these jewels because they wake abruptly or naturally jolted to consciousness by alarms. Now, I wrote this on X about 2-3 days ago, and I just thought to elaborate on what I was thinking when I wrote this. The concept of our waking thoughts is something that a lot of people are yet to key into. A lot of people do not understand the concept of waking thoughts. And I think this is it's a very unfortunate thing for you not to take advantage of this incredible phenomenon called your waking thoughts. Because in your waking thoughts are a lot of answers that you are searching for. Your waking thoughts. Your waking thoughts are those thoughts that come to your mind first thing as you are waking up, not even when you are fully awake. As you are waking up, there's some thoughts coming to your mind. It almost seems like you were engaged in a conversation while you were sleeping. But then, as you begin to wake up, it's like you're being pulled away from that conversation, but there are embers of that conversation that are beginning to seep into your consciousness. Those are your waking thoughts. They are like morning dew. As the sun comes out, they begin to disappear. That's exactly what your waking thoughts are like. The more awake you are, the more your reasoning kicks in, the more your waking thoughts begin to fade, and then it seems like it was a dream. You can't even remember the exact words anymore. Your waking thoughts have a very small window before it begins to close, a small window of opportunity of getting clarity. But I believe, as small as the window is, if you can hold on to it, it will bring a lot of incredible answers that you've been searching for in your life. For me, the idea of the waking thoughts, for me, started, I discovered this very young when I was in primary school. And as a lot of you would know, I struggled through primary school. I didn't enjoy school. I didn't enjoy the mode of learning. For me, I felt assimilating a lot of what was taught in class was a challenge. It seemed very abstract, very unrelatable. So every term before exams, we would have revisions at home. And there was a lot of attention paid to me when it was exam time because my sisters pretty much did better in exams effortlessly. Their study life was good. For some reason, they found school more interesting, but I didn't. I had this incredible, imaginative, creative mind that was very visual. And school in my days wasn't visual. It was very theoretical, even primary education. So it was hard for me to grasp and to retain. So during examination period, before examination, we used to have revisions that weekend. So let's say examinations were to start on Monday. That weekend, my parents would take time to revise, especially with me. And so my dad would take time to sit with me for hours on Saturday and some part of Sunday to just go through some of the subjects with me to be sure I was studying and I was understanding. But then, I used to drift in and out of, my attention would drift in and out. So he always got frustrated. And I remember this period where he was so frustrated about asking me questions that we had studied, and me telling him I don't know the answer, I don't remember. So he got a ruler, and every time I told him I don't remember, I was too silent, extended silence, which meant I didn't remember the answer. He would hit me on the head with the ruler. And it wasn't the pain, because it wasn't like a painful hit on the head. It was more like a tap. But then it was what the tap signified to me. Every time I was tapped on the head, I felt like I was dumb. I felt like, Tola, why are you so dumb? Why is it so hard? Because I know he told you this thing. You studied it just about 5 minutes ago. Why is it so hard for you to recall these answers? And so for me, I had to adapt to cramming, which was not a way of learning at all. So I just held it in my head long enough for me to reply my dad. But that never helped. So that period, I got tapped on the head a lot, and I would cry and cry. And after some time, you would realize, okay, he needs to go and rest, and I need to take some rest from the revision too. So he would tell me, go back to your room and read on your own, and we'll come back here and meet in 1 hour's time. So I'll go back to the room with my books, crying and sobbing, and crying so intensely that I would get to the room, and instead of reading, I would just sleep off out of the tiredness of just trying to cram and crying so much. So I'll just sleep off. And then I would wake up again after a while, and I'll say, oh, I haven't read what my dad asked me to read. And I'll be like, oh man, I need to meet with him in 5 minutes. And I know that there's no time again to go back and read, because I've been asleep for a good part of 45 to 50 minutes. And I just say, okay, I'm going back, and I'm not going to take more taps on the head. And I realized that when I wake up and I go and meet him, and we're back to revising again, he will go to the questions and ask me questions. And this time, I was giving him the answers. And that even shocked me, because I was thinking, where are these answers coming from? Why do I remember these things so clearly? I didn't spend this 1 hour reading, I spent it sleeping. And now that I'm awake, these answers are coming. And I was so shocked. I'm like, oh, that's good. You can see it's good for you to take time and go and read. And I was like, I didn't read anything. And I'll see myself answering the questions effortlessly. And that was the first time it struck me. As a young boy, I think I couldn't have been anything, I think 9 or 10. And I realized there was an incredible thing in sleeping and waking up. There was something it did to the brain. When you give the brain the opportunity to rest, it goes and it analyzes all that you fed it, and it puts it together. So everything that happens during your day is a puzzle. But when you sleep, the conscious mind stops interrupting the spiritual mind, and then the spiritual mind puts everything together, and then the conscious mind wakes up to a solved puzzle, a picture of a solved puzzle. But the reality is that picture doesn't stay for too long. If the conscious mind is distracted, immediately it wakes up, it will scrabble that puzzle again, and then it begins to look for how to put the puzzle together logically, something that has been solved spiritually. And that is the concept of our waking thoughts. When you go to bed, the conscious mind rests, and the spiritual, the inner mind, is fully awake. And the spiritual mind doesn't need an education. It is full of infinite intellect. But we don't hear it a lot when we are conscious, because the conscious mind is full of ego. So it argues a lot and wants to come across like it knows all things. But the spiritual mind is silent and calm and whispers. So a lot of times the answers we want are right there within our spirit. But the ego of our consciousness cancels these things out. I experienced this again when I was working actively as a graphic designer, whenever I had a logo design to do. And I'll think about it, think about it during the day. And then I go to bed. And just in my waking hours, I see the color, I see the shape, I see the concept. But then I need to hold on to it. Or else, when I'm fully awake, I begin to question it. And then before I know it, it's lost. A lot of the things I write to, for those that follow me on X or on Instagram or on WhatsApp, you see that I write a lot and I put up a lot of my thoughts. A lot of these thoughts are waking thoughts. This started happening to me in 2022. I would just wake up and I would have a thought in my mind lingering. It's like the latter end of a conversation that I can't remember, but then I just remember a few lines. And in 2022, I decided to start writing them down. And in writing them down, I realized that a lot of them were incredible, incredible thoughts that I knew didn't come from my reasoning, didn't come from me reading a book. It was just a spiritual conversation to what I'd absorbed from life during the day. So I became very conscious of my waking thoughts. And that's what I put out there today in writing and some of it in podcast mode to help people have clarity. Your waking thoughts are very important. Those thoughts you have at the beginning of your waking up before you become fully conscious, where you are still groggy, very important. But a lot of times we miss out on this thought because a lot of us live a fast life. A fast life. A fast life is a big opposition to a clear life. A fast life. A lot of us have alarms set by our bedside with our phones that jolt us into consciousness. So that spiritual conversation we are having ends abruptly. There is no ease into it. So there's no way we remember even the latter end of the conversation. There are no embers that are let in to our consciousness. So we wake up with a sense of emergency rather than a sense of clarity. That's the biggest problem I have when people take jobs that allow that tamper with their sleep. No matter how well paying your job is, if it requires for you to be there at very early hours of the morning and leave very late at night, it's taking more from you than it's giving. No matter how much that job is paying you as remuneration, it's taking more from you. You become a very confused person. You might be your bank account might increase, but then your self-clarity, your deposit of self-awareness will drastically reduce. I have a lot of empathy for people that stay in very fast cities like Lagos, New York, London. We kind of envy them, but a lot of times we should pray for them. That's why there are a lot of crimes in these places. It's the lack of clarity. People don't know who they are, so they sink into depression and delusions. That's why I lived in Lagos for a long time. If the things you see just between your house and going to work in Lagos is ridiculous. Some of it is stranger than fiction. People will think you made it up. The things you actually see people do, the experiences you have, you'll be surprised that human beings think that way or do not think the way they should. Because it's a very fast-paced life. And where there is speed, there can't be clarity. Nature is very self-sustaining. Very self-sustaining entity, nature. If you study it, very self-sustaining. And what I mean is, you see, I have a tree outside that was growing so tall and it was getting into the electricity wires. And it became a concern to me. So I had someone to cut it down. And the guy cut it. And this was about 4 weeks ago. And I looked at it this morning and I started seeing small branches coming out again. Very little. Some of them not longer than my index finger. But those things, give it a little time. Those things will grow into branches longer than my arm. And then grow into branches probably taller than me. But it's going to take time. Nature would replenish that tree. That tree would grow again, but it would take time. Nature is self-healing. So if you have a sickness, the higher chances is that nature would heal back. I remember watching this wildlife documentary. Animals don't have hospitals they go to. I remember this lion. Was it a lion or a tiger? It was a lion. It had this terrible injury on the face, terrible gash across the face. I don't know where it got it from, but then it got it from somewhere. Terrible gash. And I thought the lion was going to die, but then in the documentary, they followed the lion. They didn't follow it, but then after a year, they came back to the same place and saw the lion. And the lion had a scar after a year, but the wound had healed. And they were surprised. They said this thing was meant to have been infected and it was meant to die from infection. But by some way, nature healed the lion. It took 1 year, and you could still see the scar, but it took 1 year to bring the lion back to health. Nature always is a self-solving puzzle. But the problem is that it doesn't solve the puzzle in a fast way. It takes its time. A lot of times when I talk about nature, I'm talking about God. God is the spirit of nature. And the Bible says a lot of times that people get frustrated with God because they think God is slow, and man counts slowness as weakness. But God takes his time. And he has put that very attribute in nature. So a fast life is a life that goes against the concept and the wisdom of God. God is a God that does things intentionally and does things in phases. So a lot of times it comes across to us as slow because man is impatient. We are eager to get into our day and solve the problem. Man doesn't believe in small doses, but God does. He believes in installments. That's why when God is making a child, there are different stages that go a number of months before the child is fully formed. God could have made it, a child is born, 2 seconds after you have intercourse. That would be a terrible problem. But then, God makes it an extended period to show us his character. Not because he's limited, but to show us his character. That he's slow and intentional. Slow and intentional. And what we see, and that's slow by our description anyway. He's not slow to himself. He's just perfect timing. But we see it as slow. And that's why a lot of us lose our waking thoughts. Because we just jump into our fast-paced day. But your waking thoughts has those answers. There are a lot of things in my life that I was searching for answers for. And a lot of it came in my waking thoughts. A friend of mine sent me a post some days ago. And it was pretty interesting. And it was a pretty revealing post. I'll see if I can find it. It says, according to society, luxury is cars, expensive clothes, a lavish lifestyle. But real luxury in life is slow mornings, freedom to choose, a good night's sleep, peace of mind, Calm and boring days. Being present. People you love. People who love you back. They are not the things acquired, but rather the result of purposeful and a fulfilling existence. I think one thing that really struck me was the slow mornings. Slow mornings. A lot of people do not appreciate the gift of slow mornings. We don't even understand it. That you're waking up not rushing into your day. That you're not being woken up by an alarm. A lot of us don't know what it's like to wake up naturally. And you can never get those embers of the spiritual conversations that you were having while you were sleeping if you don't wake up naturally. Because that conversation fades. But if you break it abruptly, you will not remember anything, even though the answer has been given to you. Slow mornings are a blessing. You see, since I started committing to my podcast as my work, I started reeling back from, traditional work. And so I wake up naturally. No need to set an alarm. I don't set an alarm anymore. I wake up naturally. My body wakes up itself. But you see, when I wake up, I go out and try to take some fresh air and get inspired by that. But then what I see is a lot of people hurrying off to work in their suit and ties and getting on bikes and cabs and in their cars, just rushing off to work. And at a point, I started to feel, they are living the good life. They are living the responsible life. I'm living an irresponsible life. And I see some of them glance at me from the corner of their eyes and just look at me and like, what's this guy? Why is this guy not dressed up for work yet? But then I realized that I'm beginning to envy people who are suffering. They're suffering because they are going out looking for answers that they can find naturally. So a lot of them are missing out on clarity of self because what they are seeking is clarity of activity. So that activity of rushing out to work becomes higher than the activity of self-reflection. And that's the mistake we make. As I've said in some of my earlier podcasts, that clarity is a pyramid. On the bottom part of the pyramid is clarity of activity. What should I do with my life? But that's where a lot of us stick to. That's what we feel will bring meaning to our lives. And the middle part of the pyramid is clarity of relationships. Who should I be with? Who should be my friend? Who should I fall in love with? Who should I marry? That kind of thing. Who should I do this business with? Who should be my client? It's quite important who you should be with. Company. And I'll come to that before I close this. But on the highest part is clarity of self. And that is the most important clarity anyone should have. Who am I? What was I created for? Why was I created? Who am I? What's special about me? What's special about me? Is in that very top part of the pyramid that confidence, self-esteem, purpose is hidden. But a lot of us struggle for that bottom part of the pyramid. What should I be doing? What should I do? And we are initiated into this as young children. When you meet a child, one of the first things you ask, what school do you go to? Almost what do you do? So the child feels a need to clarify where he belongs over who they truly are. So we hardly ask a child, who are you? Who are your friends? And this is where I want to talk about clarity of relationships. Not as important as clarity of self, but very important. You see, waking thoughts a lot of times come from where, remember I said the spiritual mind solves the puzzle of what the conscious mind sees during the day. A lot of us don't have waking thoughts or any significant waking thoughts Because where our consciousness during the day is hanging out with people that we shouldn't hang out with, people that don't ask intelligent questions, people that don't pose us with intelligent challenges. So the clarity of relationship is foggy. So when the spiritual mind puts together, it doesn't put together a puzzle that makes any true meaning. If your association is not right, your revelation would be insignificant. It can only reveal or work with the puzzles that you give it. So a lot of you don't even have any puzzles. The biggest puzzle you have is how to meet up with the demands of your boss at work. Biggest puzzle you have is how to keep up with the Joneses. The biggest puzzle you have is how to compete with people. No real existential puzzles, because your day is fast. The biggest puzzle you have is, how do I get to work early the next day? How do I meet the first boss? The people that live in New York or live in London and have the subway, go to big cities like Japan, they have subway problem because in the morning people are just thinking, I need to get to the subway early. So in the end, they go to bed thinking about the subway. And so the spiritual mind, the puzzle it puts together, is how to get you to the subway early enough. How much does that matter to your existence? You have no real interactions, apart from interactions with people at work over deadlines and client accounts. Nothing existential. Your waking thoughts are a jewel. They're very important. But then living a fast life robs you of this wisdom that comes through your waking thoughts. When you have a job that requires you to get up early and go to bed late, a good night's sleep, a lot of us underestimate what it means. Because if you don't sleep, the spiritual mind cannot be active. Remember, the spiritual mind is not fast in its conversation. So it needs, when they say you need 8 hours of sleep at least, you understand, 8 hours, 7 to 8 hours. Look, those things are not just figures that people just pull up. A lot of times they might have scientific reasons, but I'll tell you spiritual reasons. Because the spiritual mind doesn't jump into conversation and just start blabbing. These are the answers, these are the answers. No. Remember, the spiritual mind is God's nature. That's the image in which God has made us that is likened to His. It doesn't have fast conversations. There's an introduction. There is a getting to know you, all while you're sleeping. And then you get into the meat of the conversation. That's why when you have 2 hours sleep, 1 hour, the spiritual mind has not even started talking. You're just getting into the pleasantries. So when you wake up, no waking thoughts, no clear waking thoughts. Maybe all your spiritual mind has told you is, how are you doing? And then you wake up and, how are you doing? That's all. That conversation was meant to be longer. But you didn't sleep early, and you had to wake up early. Some of you don't sleep at all. A lot of people take joy in not sleeping. Oh, I've not slept. I see a lot of people, especially in the creative industry, they tell you, I'm awake 2 a.m. Who is awake with me at 2 a.m.? Who is the 2 a.m. gang? Who is here with me? Let's chat. 5 a.m. You're awake. Then you go and crash because the body in itself gets so tired. So you sleep so deeply that you can't even have a meaningful conversation with your spiritual mind. There's no joy in keeping late nights. No joy. No clarity in keeping late nights. Sleep is important. It's an important gift for all of us to enjoy. Not only does it relax us, it reveals to us. Your waking thoughts. I'd like to encourage someone out there today to pay more attention to their waking thoughts. Pay more attention to your waking thoughts. The answers you look for are there. The clarity, there. The wisdom, there. The awareness, there. Pay attention to your waking thoughts and give your spiritual mind the opportunity to speak to you. My name is Tola T.A. Alabi, and you've been listening to my podcast, ProUp Masterclass.